Well, thank you for being here tonight. I'm reminded when I led or was a mentor for a group a few years ago now, and the program, and I've looked at your schedule, you're getting close to the pointy end, and I notice we can tick off leadership, developing high performance culture, emotional intelligence, business finance, innovation, sustainability and corporate responsibility, strategic planning, and I'm going to be helping you now with when you've done some dates around your project launch, your social event, teamwork on the 15th of August. What did you do there? Where did you go? Then we've got mental health, and then I'm here now developing a compelling business case. I've done this for a couple of years with the group, and I'm hoping that out of this exercise today, a couple of things are achieved for you. It's not always easy to work in groups like this. It's challenging, it's exciting, all at the same time. But I want to give you an opportunity to, and if you had a look at some of the stuff that I sent out prior, there's a methodology sitting behind what we're doing. But I want you to get a sense of the type of work that we do from the start-up programs that we work with in businesses that are scaling up. So they've either got a concept, they're ideating a concept, they've got something to first customer, or they've got a minimum viable product and they're scaling it. So that's the sort of energy, that's the sort of approach that I'm taking in this session here. But at the same time, what we learnt very early on, and we've been involved in, I guess, innovation, people coming up with ideas and trying to execute on them to a commercial endpoint. We've been around that space for about 6 years. And when we first looked at it, we tried to discover a little bit about the process itself. Because when you're coming up with an idea, there are a number of biases which sit inside of all of us. And when you're in a group and when you're in a team, I think that's even more challenging because we all bring our own particular style to what it is that we do. And some of the information that I sent you, if you got round to listening to Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, or if you had a look at some of the information that I sent through on the visualised methodology that sits behind the Strategyzer stuff that we use, many of you I'm sure would be familiar with, you know, the principles that it's based on, a lean approach. I would hope at the end of tonight that you've got a better sense of yourself and how you contribute to a group and how you ideate. So from your perspective, I'd hope that you've got a sense within the group from this exercise that there's a way that you can recognise you can communicate with each other and work with each other as you get to the pointy end of this project and you have to deliver, which is difficult when we're all, I know it from my group that I worked with, we're all very busy. Time is of the essence in this project and we're all very motivated the closer we get to the end point. So I also want you to be able to have a sense of how you can work as a group. I also want for me to give you some tools, and we're going to hone in specifically on some aspects of the canvas, which I'll explain soon. And I want you to get to a point where you can test the validity of your thinking, so that in what you do with regards to your ideas and what might be washing around, if we can go from sort of this to some sort of straight line. You know, it's not a very sophisticated drawing, but it'll make sense when I take you through it a little bit more, when there's a process sits underneath that from the invention stage where there's a lot of ideas running around, moving through a continuum to a point where we end up with some sort of design that can be validated, can be tested, and can be subject to some assumptions being placed upon it. So that's what we're hoping to do. Now, I always try with these sessions, it's okay for Steve to talk about his experiences and his perspective from the other side of the desk, from helping people in business or starting a business. So we've got two guests coming tonight, quite disparate ends of a product, but what it at least gives you a chance to see. These guys have worked with us using some of these approaches. The two of them are going to give a pitch. So they're pitching their idea to you, so you're going to see how did they refine the complexity of their idea, bring it back and distill it to a point where they can execute on communicating it to you in 5 to 6 minutes, which is what you've got for your part of what you do. And I know you've got the 20-page report or something of that nature, the depth.
2 minutes.
2 minutes you've got, okay, so not even much at all. So it's not so far away from having the essence of a concept through to then being able to explain it quite clearly so that anyone from any standpoint can understand it. So we've got Dan's coming in, Dr. Dan. He's going to talk about his project management platform. And then I've got Lockie coming in from Grain Fed Brewery, who's going to talk about how he went from having nothing, no beer, to having a brewery and selling beer and having a well-respected regional beer. So you may think, well, what's that got to do with us? Well, it's got a lot to do with you, because you've got a short time. When I look at what it is that you have to do, quite a challenge. You've got a task is to consider the vision and branding for the Greater Newcastle region, how it can be promoted as a global city, and then within that, 2 tasks: develop an identity, a position a concept for the region, and then identify more specifically, and that's where this stuff that's going to come into play will be useful for you as a tool and as a group to sit around a planning map to attack your customer, your value segment, about what you're going to do. Does that sound all right? So fairly interactive. You can be working for part of the session with each other in your group. I've got a little toolkit for you here to begin on, and then it's up to you guys going forward how much of this you use, how you would like to use it, but we'll get going with some of the activity now. So those of you who don't know about the Business Centre, the Business Centre is a not-for-profit organisation, been along for a long time. We don't take any equity from businesses that we work with, and in fact I think the term start-up or scale-up wouldn't have existed when the Business Centre began. I've had 3 businesses. One of them had quite a bias towards using technology as a solution, but I certainly wouldn't have called myself a start-up. It's a fairly new term in regards to how do we look at a business. You think of people that started businesses 50 years ago, 30 years ago. They don't say, oh, I've got a start-up, just went and started a business. It's pretty simple. So the fundamentals remain the same. But I have to say, some of the businesses we've worked with over the last 3 or 4 years, businesses and ideas can scale quite quickly in a way that you couldn't before. And in our business that we had, once we moved our business away from essentially a paper-based compliance management system business to one which used a web-based platform, our business, without intention, because this was a few years ago now, without intention, we picked up customers globally which we never marketed for. That phenomena is now normal in any business where you can sell stuff, whether it be a product, a service, a platform, a consultancy services. We know it's all the genie's out of the bottle. So we found businesses we work with now quite a few have been able to scale quite quickly. Our values at the Business Centre are about foresight, energy, empowerment and diversity, because when someone comes with an idea, our business advisors want to look at the horizon that's available. We want to empower people to be able to execute on their idea. Every idea is welcome. There's no bad ideas when you come through the door, but at the same time you have to be honest with people, and sometimes we use a term inside our own office about a DK, which is a dream kill, because it's important that if a person is going to invest in an idea, invest heavily in IP, invest heavily in prototyping something, it's our job to make sure that they've scanned the environment, looked at their IP strategy, and made sure that they haven't invested in something before they go to market and go way too far down the pathway. So we work with businesses at different stages, and we work right across the region in regards to the services we provide and who we work with. We've got a great team of people. All the people that we've got at the Business Centre provide advice have owned a business. We've all got business qualifications. I guess it's a case of we don't want someone to come in and ask about starting a business or coming up with a commercial idea and our guys not having a sense about how to do that themselves. Our method, I guess our ethos is people can start, they can scale, or they can discover, start, scale, but give back. And we connect back a lot of the people in our ecosystem to support each other. So it's amazing how many businesses can be quite able to support another business and create some sort of supply chain or complete some sort of connection. Right, your problem is a challenging one. I'm going to now jump a bit into your personal perspective on how do you ideate, how do you create, what's your bias, how do you operate. I'd then like to do a quick activity about how you communicate that and how we communicate with each other. I'll then get you to try and think about, am I a Picasso, am I a Cézanne in regards to my bias and my creativity that sits inside my way of operating. And then we're going to probably then have our first guest do their pitch so you get a sense of it. Then we'll move on to using the value proposition canvas and that methodology. And that'll make, that should then, once we've got a sense of your bias, once we've got a sense of, well, look at how that person communicated, let's see how we can attack our customer. And you guys have to have in mind, no matter what you're doing, whether the customer be the judges who you're aiming at as an avatar customer for what you're trying to achieve, and that needs to be kept in mind. The other customer, the primary customer, which is the focus of this, is possibly the second task. You know, they're attracting that ASICS company. That's an avatar. How do you get to that person, that CEO, that board, and how do you communicate with them the central value of your idea, the pain, the gain, the pain that you're taking away, the advantage that you're giving through your business model and through your proposition. Okay. So, who listened to it, the Malcolm Gladwell podcast? I need to know what sort of knowledge I've got in the room. 1, 2. All right, do yourself a favour. It won't take long to listen to. It's a really interesting insight. But what I'm going to do now is just play a little bit around with that insight. He bases it on a book by a guy called David Gallinson. He's an economist, and he looked at the value of creativity from an economic perspective. And it's a fascinating podcast, but he talks about how often, in regards to creativity, in regards to the central process of how do I go about expressing myself around ideas, we can get a bit stuck, or we can get, we may have a bias, as I said. And one of the early insights into this that Gladwell talks about is in regard to music. And there's a theory in psychology that says the music that we listen to at the ages of 19 to 20 is a music that imprints itself most deeply upon our unconsciousness. So if you were to make a list of your favourite songs, you'll probably, perhaps, you know, there might be some that are an exception, but you'll probably come up time after time with the same list of songs. When you go back to the songs that mean most to you, the songs that you like the best. Yes, we can reintroduce, my daughter's introducing me to a whole heap of new songs now, but I like to go back to my songs. Those songs that mean the most to you will resonate very strongly with you. Now, no one in this room has probably got any idea what that album cover is, but that's an album called Deceptive Bends by a band called 10cc, and they've got a 3-part masterpiece in there, as far as I'm concerned, called Feel the Benefit. Now, no one knows what that means, but that music, to me, elicits all sorts of responses and reactions, and it sits nicely with me, and I don't go seeking any other way when I go back to that song list. So that list could go down a bit further, but what they're saying about creativity is that bias. Now, before we move on to the next part about whether you are a Picasso or whether you are a Cezanne or whether you are a Leonard Cohen or a Bob Dylan in regards to the way you approach things, I want you to do a really brief activity, the person next to you, based on music. You can pick a song. I'm not going to get you to sing, don't worry, it's not karaoke. You can pick a song, and then then you reverse the exercise. So what happens here is the person next to you will tap a song. It'd probably be a song or a tune that you know really well. You cannot sing, you cannot move your mouth, there is no words involved. You just have to, through percussive means, express the song to the person next to you and see if they can guess it. Then reverse and do the same thing. And then we'll have a play around with what that makes us think about when that happens, when we try and communicate that. So just the person next to you, think of a song, and you're going to tap it. You can't sing it. You can only communicate the song through percussion. Go. A couple of minutes each. Okay, let's stop the frustration. If you've got someone that can't get the obvious song, it's so obvious what you're tapping to them, isn't it? So, okay, let's wind it up. Let's just explore a little bit about what that tells us. So, you know, going back to that song, Feel the Benefit, parts 1, 2 and 3, I know it so well. I could tap it out. There's no chance in hell that someone can discover what it is, but I know it really well inside me, and I now get you guys to communicate, and the sorts of songs that come up that you're trying to communicate can be quite obvious sometimes. Row, row, row the boat, Mary, whatever, nursery rhymes, you know, We Will Rock You, all those ones that come up. But what does it feel like to be the receiver of that information and the sender of that information? What does it elicit in some of you? What came up as a result of that? Yeah. Did it seem so obvious? It seemed so obvious, and yet they were so stupid they couldn't work it out.
Correct.
Right. So reflect upon this as something to help you in your groups in regards to just fairly, simple communication about an idea, and how well have you expressed it, and how open is the person, or what has been their background to be able to hear it or to understand it. It's a fascinating piece. There's another podcast as well that I listened on that. A guy did his PhD in America on the whole principle of this type of communication. So let's go a bit further though, and this is the kind of exercise that I'd suggested and put forward to some of you to consider to do about the next phase about creativity and how we innovate. Remembering that I said we took a jump into this about 6 years ago, and we wanted to first understand, before we began trying to help people around innovation. This is when our Prime Minister then was Malcolm Turnbull, and I think we had a national policy around innovation, the Innovation Nation. Fair enough. But innovation has been going on for ages. It's just disrupted industry. But it is what it is, but we wanted to understand it better. And one of the things we looked at was, how do people innovate? So, are you a Cezanne or are you a Picasso? Both geniuses, but they took different ways to iterate a concept or an idea. Yes, they were artists. This is based on this David Gallinson book, but there are two different trajectories to innovation and ideation that he saw in regards to how productive they were. On the one hand, he spoke about those that do their great work really early in their life, work quickly with very specific ideas, and they can articulate themselves very clearly. They plan meticulously and then they execute. They've got it done. So think about some people sitting around in groups, sitting around your workplaces, those people that if we do a personality dimension test, they might sit way off here in the right-hand side of a quadrant. But they're the sort of people with regards to ideas, they've got a sense of it, they get the shape of it quite quickly and they execute. And so that was what was considered in this research was Picasso. They're called conceptual innovators. Picasso is a great example. He burst onto the scene in the last century, in the early 20s, electrified the art world and was considered a genius just because of the way that he perceived art and the way he perceived expression. But there's another kind of innovator in his theory, and he calls these people the experimental innovators. These are the people that never have a clear, ready articulated idea. They don't work quickly. When they start off, they work off drafts. They're perpetually unsatisfied. These are Cezanne, people that just go over and over. It's said that Cezanne did over 200 portrait paintings of his wife. He just kept painting the same topic, the same subject over and over and over. And they say when they do the X-ray photography on his art pieces, they can see that even underneath those there's painting over painting over painting. Never satisfied. Still considered a genius, as Picasso was, but just a different way, an experimental innovator. Other examples, when you look at the way people create, the way that people innovate, would be Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick. It's said that he wrote this in a heartbeat. He's a Picasso, just wrote it like that, bang. Mark Twain, on the other hand, with regards to Huckleberry Finn, had many, many rewrites over and over again until he could be satisfied that it was in the right state. He was a Cezanne. If you look at filmmakers, some of you might be familiar with someone, Orson Welles. He did one amazing film. It was called Citizen Kane. He was a Picasso. Often said that he didn't really produce much more than that, just this masterpiece. And then you look at someone like Alfred Hitchcock, a British movie maker, director, who made films such as Psycho and The Birds, over and over again, the same theme, same sort of thing, but it's coming from a creative process, coming from an idea. How do you make a movie? What's my theme? How am I going to operate? Then my last one, that's a favourite one that I like to tell people about, is Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan. And I'm fascinated by this one, and that's mainly the podcast that I gave you from Malcolm Gladwell is about the song Hallelujah, written by Leonard Cohen. Most understood and appreciated in recent times by someone else, Jeff Buckley, but written by Leonard Cohen in the late 1970s, early 80s. The story about this, though, is two different styles of approaching music. It's said that Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan actually admired each other from afar. And they did want to meet with each other, and one summer, I think it was, in Paris in about 1980, they did happen to meet each other. And when they met each other, of course they were going to have a conversation. It was inevitable. They had a conversation. And Leonard Cohen saw Bob Dylan and said to me, "Your song, I and I, how long did that take you to write? It's a masterpiece. I love that song. How long did it take you to write?" And he said, 15 minutes. Dylan then said, "Hallelujah. How long did that take you to write that song?" He said, 2 years. He lied. It took him 5 years to write that song. So he ached over a piece of music, a product, a work product if you like, but they worked in different ways to get to the end result, that it could have some value. So can you see, in regards to how do we approach ideation, how do we approach creativity, I think there's a lot to learn from the creative industries, because essentially in the end, when we look at invention and pivoting and changing and ideating in a workplace, whether it be a work process, a new product that you might be introducing in the mining industry, whatever it might be, a new detonator system, whatever it could be, in the end, if we stay with this conventional ways of expressing value to a new customer segment and we stick to the same old pathways, what are we going to end up with? And I think this is the challenge for industry, the challenge for project management, is that we do get somewhat stymied by the imposition of the systems that exist already in the culture of the business that we're working with. But ultimately, if you look at the principles of creativity, we need to throw everything up in the air. We need oblique collisions. We need unlikely partners to find each other and to come up with ways of trying to solve a problem that is often quite unconventional. And in many businesses now, we are seeing different departments thrown together in project teams using startup methodologies to approach conventional business solutions or product solutions or R&D. So there's some simple concepts there to think about. Trying to communicate a song, our biases, what we think we're hearing and why they're not hearing it. Thinking about whether you are a Bob Dylan or a Leonard Cohen or a Picasso or a Cézanne. How do you operate in your group and in your business with regards to communicating value? I've got these guest speakers coming. I've just got to keep an eye on if they're contacting me. There might be someone at the front door. If someone could, yeah. So innovation. I'm going to give you next section after this, I'm going to dump some of my knowledge that I think might just assist you with my experience of working in this ecosystem, because the project that you have to solve, we've worked in a couple of spaces there, so I just want to share some of my insights about this landscape, this ecosystem. But before we do that, I'm just going to end off with the innovation stuff around some of the principles of what innovation is and how you can come up with a compelling business case to execute on innovation. And it's based on, any of you that have done a master's where you might have done a bit of business study around innovation and theory. The founder or the father of innovation is Schumpeter, or Schumpeterian innovation, and the method or the definition points in regards to innovation for him that he's been able to capture is that he calls innovation a gale of creative destruction. So innovation is a degrading of one section of industry, allowing for a new approach to delivering a product or service or a solution for a customer need. That's essentially all that it is. And we have not, any of us, I think, more than in recent years, seen so many aspects of that. And we've worked just in our business as a response to some disruption that's happened to regulated industries. We've been asked to come in and help a few industries around innovation when their industry's been turned upside down. One being taxis. Uber was completely dishevelled, a regulated marketplace where through the use of a technology platform, through peer-to-peer connections, through no need for infrastructure or the burden of compliance, a heavily regulated and sound and steady industry was turned on its head. We had to try and work with taxi industries around that. Another one would be one that people may not know as much about, but we've been doing a lot of work in it more recently, is around the NDIS. It's over a $20 billion industry. It's of the same value of Medicare in regards to the spend, but it's essentially disrupted services to people with disabilities, from one which provided large sums of money to large organisations under a block funding model, to one where it became a customer-driven model, essentially with a platform, which is the NDIS portal, linking up people that have disabilities with service providers through a regulated system, and that released the funding. So it's disrupted a marketplace, and we're working with small businesses mainly and medium-sized businesses responding to that. But my favourite term out of, and this is I think useful to you guys, and I know you protect your ideas and maybe you need to do it, but think about this term with regards to your idea in your group that I love from Shumta, but he calls, in innovation, there's kind of an apex. G'day. There's an apex, I'm going to let these guys come in a moment, I'll get them set up, where the opportunity for innovation will demise at some point. For example, let's look at taxis and Uber. You're getting a few other share ride platforms coming into the marketplace. A few other people are getting onto it. Uber had a big lead. They still haven't made any money, but they had a big lead. But that's degrading now as others come into the marketplace. So what Shumta calls that, and I love it, and you guys want to think about it, as I said, for your ideas, is taking the early rents. So when a new opportunity and a new market opens up, take the early rents, get in early on the curve, because they'll degrade over time. And there's all sorts of amazing stuff walks through our door. Lots of people with app plays, they come with an idea to say, oh, I've got this idea for an app, but when you go and search it, there's 100 of them. So it's not that the app's not a bad play, it's how you take advantage of the opportunity to put that app in. So you can never not think about the market opportunity that the value is facing toward. A young lady that worked with us a few years ago now had an app called Crave. It's now called Eatsy. Her name is Jessica Contz. She owned a social media company for restaurants and cafes. She initially came in with an app play for Crave. Crave was basically Tinder for food. You pick a dish that you like, you put your parameters around it, and you go searching for that dish. And you go swipe left, you swipe right. She went with an app play where she was trying to monetise the investment she'd made on that through downloads, for people purchasing the app for a small amount of money. We came in and we looked at it differently, and we worked with her with a group of us, and we looked, why don't we monetise it more based on the old sort of entertainment book, where you get the money generated from the cafes, from the restaurants, so that they actually come in with tokens and they come in with vouchers, and they pay through almost a sponsor. You basically sell them the real estate on the app. That approach. So an app play, but looking at the value proposition differently. So you guys think about this when you're ideating your solutions, because guess what? I think with these exercises, if you don't apply that principle, there's a fair chance that some of you are going to come up with quite similar ideas. We'll probably have a bias going towards what we think is quite unique. So jump into this stage with it and get messy at the start. Get messy and maybe go outside of the group. Seek some input to test the idea, to test the thinking, or to speak to some of you, those of you got younger people around in your lives. Talk to them. They'll just give you a completely unhindered idea about how to solve this problem, because they're looking out there. They're not looking back very much. So think about how you might expose your thinking around your idea. Dan, are you going to be able to just plug in, do you think?
Have you got an HDMI cable up there?
We've got cable, yeah?
Yep.
Yep. What sort of input? You
just HDMI.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
We'll give you a couple of ticks to get set, because we've got to mic you up.
I got that.
Yep. He's done. Come up, mate.
Okay.
So I've set the scene for the guys, Dan, about that you've been through our journey, that these guys have got a short time to distill down an idea and have people understand it in a short amount of time. So there'll be a Q&A session for Dan afterwards, but Dan's going to come up and just punch out.
Going through the journey. So this is on the way to refinement. I'm Dan. My colleague Lachlan up the back there, we're founders of a company called Composition. Composition was formed by the two of us and another guy based on a couple of decades of experience in large and complex projects, mostly in defence and aerospace, but other government programs and some commercial work. And what we decided to do is we decided to build a platform that's going to help change the way people think and share knowledge and information in these large programs. The reason we did it was we're driven by this almost constant failure of large, complex technical programs. That's probably not news to anyone that this stuff happens, but if you're looking for what people want in a value proposition out of this, if I'm a project sponsor, I want to make sure that the program that's being delivered is not one of these things. It's actually going to deliver intended outcomes. It's not going to run over budget. If I'm a program manager, I want to make sure that my program's not making the news and the headlines. If I'm an engineer, I want to make sure that I've got credibility at the end of a program because I've done stuff right. Our insight is a large part of what causes that is a communication problem, and it's a specific type of communication problem. It's a communication problem with the enormous volume of technical information and detail that needs to be communicated in large technical programs. It's a two-part problem. There's two problems there, one in the way that we represent that technical information, and one in the way that we share and silo that information between multiple stakeholders. So we'll address each part of the problem in turn. If you think of, I'm not entirely sure where all you guys come from and what your backgrounds are, but if you've worked on large programs, particularly in defence and aerospace, you've probably seen the 500-page requirement document that floats around a program and it says the system shall do this, and it repeats that 3,000 or 4,000 times, and that's meant to describe to everybody what the system does. Or if you come from the software world, on large programs you've probably seen backlogs of thousands of user stories saying as a whatever, I want to be able to. That's the wrong representation for information if we're trying to communicate it with people. Now, it's analogous to me throwing 1,000 pieces of a jigsaw puzzle in front of you, pointing at it and saying, is that what you want? Now, if you're an engineer, pointing at it and saying, can you build this? How long will it take? How much will it cost? It's an untenable situation because as human beings, we can't process and communicate that way. Yet we've been trying to do it for decades. The other part of the problem is in large programs, we have many stakeholders that sit around doing different things, and they all have technical information in siloed databases. They all work in silos. There's program information, there's technical requirements, there's test information, there's architectures, and people pass documents around. Or in the world of defence, people don't pass documents around. They share it in PowerPoint presentations, and whatever you can get out of that, that describes the program to people. It leads to inconsistencies and it leads to overruns and failure to deliver what's intended because, again, it's no means for communication. So for you guys, if there's a value proposition in here anywhere for everyone, it's on this slide. What we're trying to do is we're building a platform that integrates this information, that connects all of that information and represents it in a way so that it can be analysed and searched and insights and knowledge can be gained out of it. So if I'm on the ground doing a job, if I'm a program manager or a technical guy doing engineering, what I want to know is that I can get information from everywhere and it can be connected and I can understand it and I can share that understanding with all the other stakeholders in a program. If I'm a program sponsor or someone that cares about what's happening at the end of this, the result of that is that it reduces cost and it reduces risk on these large programs. We know that because there's a history to what we're doing. So until the start of this year, I'd made a living for about the last 15 years applying modelling and simulation and integration of information as a consultant and a contractor on these large programs. What we do is based on a couple of decades of what originally came out of research institutions in Australia as a way of representing that information so that it could be integrated as one big whole. We know it works. In 2008, the Australian Research Council put it in the list of top 10 research that could benefit Australia financially as a country because it saved tens to hundreds of millions of dollars on large programs of work that's based on real data. What we hadn't been able to do was get an industry to adopt it. Now again, it was a consulting-led practice. So what we've done since about February this year We built a software as a service platform that lets people create these integrated models, that lets people put all of this information together from different sources and connects it in a way that we can analyse it and understand it and get insights into it, to hopefully deliver those outcomes that we've been able to achieve as consultants and contractors, but to have everybody do this stuff. Where we're at and where we're going. So at the moment, we've built an MVP. That MVP is usable by people like myself and other people trained to build models. It can absorb, it can ingest information from everywhere else. We're in the process, we're in discussions with a couple of defence programs and with a defence prime to validate what we've done, to make sure that what our platform supports is what I've been able to do over the last 15 years when I've been brought in as a consultant. By the end of this year, we hope to release our minimum viable product to people who are not me, to other organisations, for them to use it themselves. And based on that validation, we're hoping to launch officially by the middle of next year. Part of our play is that we've built an open API around this. As well as supporting communication, we've realised that once you have this integrated model, we can do some really cool things to accelerate the engineering lifecycle. We can generate test cases that we can guarantee achieve 100% coverage over those requirements. We can generate the architectural artifacts that an architect like Lachlan would spend months, years developing. We know we haven't come up with all the ideas, so we've built an open API around this so other people can plug in uses for our information, our knowledge graph. We've got some competition. Competition largely comes from consultancies and the vendors of other, what are loosely termed model-based systems engineering tools. They don't do what we do, and they all have their shortcomings as far as being able to address that communication problem and that resolution problem. We consider them partners though. We can consider consultancies as end users of our product, people that will go in and use our modelling platform and our analysis platform to help organisations. And the model-based systems engineering and product lifecycle management tools, we can ingest information from them and generate information to them to accelerate what people do with those platforms. Our estimated market, we're business to business. We're addressing markets of large programs. Within Australia, there are hundreds to thousands of large programs at any one time that would benefit from doing what we do. Worldwide, that's in the order of tens of thousands of enterprise level programs or customers. And that's pretty much across any industry really that does programs with multiple stakeholders. What we're trying to achieve over the next short while, as I said before, we're looking to validate, preferably with commencing programs in government. We're trying to access knowledge and everything in the AI space because, again, once we've got models, there's really smart stuff we can do with it. And we're on the road for looking for investment. So that's our really meant to be 5-minute but slightly longer pitch. Thank you.
Dan, you happy to take a couple of questions?
Yeah.
Just, 'cause these
Do you want
guys
to come
are
up,
right
Lockie,
here.
in case you can answer things I can't? No?
As well, please, yeah. Let the guys get an insight and they can think about this and reflect.
I was probably standing in front of that the whole time, wasn't I? And you guys couldn't see it.
So my name's Lachlan. So Dan and I actually worked together on a large defence project where we actually had issues with trying to get. So essentially, Dan, as a systems engineer, was developing our engineering process, and the particular issues we were dealing with was around how we actually gather requirements from all of the stakeholders who actually utilise the system, and from there we then create an architecture where we can actually communicate out to everyone else and say, hey, this is the solution that needs to be built, and this is, what from the information you've given us, this is what it needs to look like. And from that actual project, we spent a lot of time going back and forth with stakeholders and engaging with multiple stakeholders at different levels. So we have general users on the ground, then we have the executive branch who would actually then differ in how they actually stated they believe the requirements of what a system should look like. So that's a genesis of where Dan and I then actually saw, well, there is a way we can actually utilise or have a system that can actually create clarity of need started in February this year, and I think March was when we went through. We started with
Yeah,
with
with
the
you guys.
yeah. So
Yeah, as you can see, our pitch is still fairly raw.
Yeah.
It changes too. Lockie and I, we're not pitching so much to investors at the moment, but we're trying to get people interested in validation. And usually we sit in the room with it for an hour with people. It's, the types of people that procure these systems in defence are usually the engineering manager types that have got a history of being engineers. So it ends up being, give us a demo of what you can actually do, and we spend an hour running through a demo on our product, not so much a slide deck.
So, but going through the process that we did,
Yeah.
with regards to canvassing and the value proposition, did it help you, reposition how you might state your hypothesis or your solution?
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that, I guess the thing that I'm still working through is we have customers that are going to procure our tool, and we have the beneficiaries and the users of our platform. And sometimes they're the same people and sometimes they're not, and they have very different value propositions, which is why in that slide I'm trying to get the technical side of it. We're going to give you a model that lets you search and analyse and do a whole heap of stuff to get new insights. It's for the engineers and the program managers. What's that mean? Well, so what for somebody forking out of their pocket for a large program is it'll reduce risk and cost.
Now that's the key point that we find when we work with people when we use this approach, because it doesn't matter how sophisticated the product, to be quite honest, because the people you're selling to have got a basis of assumed knowledge and the meta language to get through the specifics and the technicalities. Everyone buys on emotion.
Yeah.
So this concept, which we're going to have you guys start on tonight, allows you to understand that and explore that. And if you listen to some of the videos that we gave you, essentially what this is doing, what the value proposition canvas is doing, is drawing out two of the fundamental aspects of the 9 dimensions of the canvas, which is saying start with the customer or start with the value proposition. And they face each other. There's a pain point, there's a gain point. You're taking away a job, a thing that people don't want to do, and that's what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
You're taking away a really painful exercise that's causing frustration and running up costs. You're going to make a decision maker in a large defence force company or organisation look really good. That's going to be a good emotional buzz for them. Taking into account the depth, they know the depth of the solution, but it's drawing out this segment and this segment, which is what I'm going to get you guys to start to work on in a little while, where you can then look at this, these 2 dimensions.
Yeah. And I think one of the complexities around that for us as well, particularly at the moment trying to sell into government, not so much in defence, but particularly other larger government agencies, is that people don't necessarily want to streamline their process. They don't want to be able to get rid of the 60 people that make up their empire, or it's sometimes it's a brilliant idea to them, but it's a brilliant idea that they don't want anything to do with, because they're empire building somewhere. And
That's right, so you've got to define that
Yeah.
right customer, the one that wants to disrupt.
yeah,
And one thing we've also known is that there's not just one value proposition. Everyone gets a particular value out of the product. So for empire builders, it's about having them keep the empire, but maybe gaining more money in their empire. One of the big things, or one of the actual gains that people get, it's not a direct pain point but reputational risk is something that we can reduce quite significantly. So for some organisations, and
particularly the primes in defence.
absolutely, yeah. So when you talk with an engineer about reputational risk, they don't really care. They're the end users of the product. But when you talk with the executives, reputational risk, that is of great importance to them, because if you're a prime and you have a runaway project, that puts you in bad stead with the government. And if you're a government organisation with a runaway project, puts you in bad stead with politicians.
So I want to conclude there, and the point that you made at the end about when you attack this exercise, given that you guys have got to develop this central concept, you've then got to face it out at an ASX 200 listed company. The value proposition, you can have a number of different value propositions for the same solution, depending on who it's facing toward. Okay, thanks guys.
Cool.
Thank you so
Thanks very
much.
much.
Appreciate it. Cheers, mate.
No worries.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Hopefully that was...
No, it's fine. So, okay. I'm going to quickly jump into my insights to help you look at the landscape you're operating in with this project. Obviously, you're aware of the Second City, Smart City movement in Newcastle. We know that under that proposal, we've got significant investment. We know that the work that we've done, we found a lot of interest around digital connectivity. And I just want to look at these segments specifically that we're aware of and that there are many projects up and running. Is there anyone from Newcastle City Council here? No? Okay. We know that, for example, an innovation hub is part of this project. We know that there's a digital precinct and high-speed fibre, broadband and integrated public domain being developed. We know that there's going to be a living lab which includes creation of a city-scale test bed or a sandpit or sandbox for people to test and iterate ideas with various levels of access. We know that there is, and we're part of that, a regional incubator program. We're part of that ecosystem as StartHouse. We know that there's national, international networks that have joined the Global Smart Cities and Communities Coalition and a global alliance, which includes members such as Amsterdam, Eindhoven, Chicago and Austin. So when you go searching for ideas and solutions, when you're trying to attract this company, go to just Google Smart Second Cities movement, and there's some nice research and some nice models existing there that you might draw upon that might help with your thinking. The ecosystem here itself, I think it's important to understand the assets of this region, and that's something we're very much aware of. I'll be happy to share this presentation as well for the guys. But you can see, just look at if the connectivity, and this is based on research from Hunter Research Foundation. It's been going on for about 7 or 8 years now. But you can see some of the key ingredients of this ecosystem. We developed a project called 360 Reasons. You can Google that site. It's still up and running. I think we had over 1 million engagements on it. And it was based on using early Samsung 3D cameras to give people a sense of this city who weren't here. And it was a response campaign where we took people, we put the goggles on, we put them in an environment. We took them out to places like the Vineyard, CSIRO, down to the convict baths, out into the sand dunes, and we asked them where did they think they were, some of the bars in Derby Street, and they said, gee, I'm in San Jose, I'm in Amsterdam, wherever it might have been. And we said, no, it's Newcastle. And they go, oh, Newcastle? So Newcastle's got some very livable elements that make it an attractive city in regards to attracting investment. The business climate's good. We've got good adoption rates. The profile of the Newcastle economy is an excellent test bed because it reflects the national economy in almost all aspects. So it's a good test bed to attract companies in regards to the economic profile. Disruption and motivation to change. We've got some good DNA around that here as an economy. Yes, I guess it's biased in some areas, perhaps manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, mining, obviously coal, agriculture, viticulture, but we do have a mindset here to be able to execute on ideas. There's a great set of anchor institutions, one of course being a research institution, but there are many others. Great public spaces, good connectivity, and great talent. So the landscape is very good for the attraction in regards to that ASX listed company to the ecosystem. So think about how you're going to convey that messaging. My little idea that I've thrown in, a little hand grenade at some things I've been around town lately with the attraction of business and particularly around rail and transport infrastructure. My idea would just be not build a fast railway to Sydney, bugger them. Just leave them alone. It's too crowded, it's no good. Let's just go straight out from here. We've got a port, we've got an airport. Let's just go into Asia, let's go international. We don't need to go to Sydney. So there's a big political bias, that's just my 2 bobs worth. I think there's a political bias that we need to have this connected pathway to Sydney. You know, the railway was faster last century than it is now because there's so many stops. It's not really rational, I don't think, from my perspective, but and you can, some of you can have that idea if you want, but I think that's a curveball to throw in there. Let's not build a fast connection. The ecosystem's here as it is. So we found in regards to the landscape here, from our perspective and the work that we do, we think there's a pretty good environment here that you might draw upon. And if you just take the time, go to Hunter If. I'm on the board of Hunter If. That's a good place to go as a curation space for bringing various parts of the ecosystem together. And there's some good information there, and there's some good information on that 360 Reasons website as well, which you can land on. So, Lockie will be here in a little while. Let's start now, and we're going to get into your group soon, and we're going to jump into the method of how do you do this value proposition stuff? How does it actually work? And I'll show you some examples, which you've got knocked up inside those work toolboxes you've got there. And then I want you to play around with it a bit. There's a few examples there. One's a taxi share ride, one's Airbnb, one's a different type of exercise, where it's people have worked up examples of how they've used the value proposition to solve that problem that you've already found and that's stated. But you then, I want you to start to think about how could we use this for our problem so we can... you've got kind of clarity here, haven't you? You kind of know what you have to do. There's parameters there. There's tolerances in there in regards to what you have to do. But you need to do some of this. But to do that, you need to define this. And as the guys were saying, very complex and technical product solution, but ultimately someone in an organisation sitting across a desk will look at a proposal and have to make a decision to spend some money. That's a customer. So think with that customer in mind, and the stuff that we do around customer avatars, this makes you do that. By an avatar, I'm sure many of you understand what we're saying there, is you're trying to really conceptualise who is buying this? Who's going to get this idea? Do they have kids? Where do they live? What hobbies have they got? What gender are they? What's their background? That makes you really, really think about the value proposition. Who are they? Who is this person? The stuff we did in NDIS, helping businesses develop products and improve their business to provide services to people with disabilities, when we did that and we had a deep dive into it, we realised the person that was choosing to spend the money from the money that they received as a person with a disability, and some people have got significant plans and budgets, it wasn't them that were making the decision. It wasn't the person with a disability in many cases that was making the decision. It was another avatar beside them. It was their carer or their parent or their family member. So there's no sense developing products in your business that were facing the participant, the person with a disability. It was the guardian that we had to sell to. So we're helping. So can you see what I'm saying? Who are you selling your idea to? I love this one, and I believe the architect here in the room, I believe in some projects in regards to infrastructure and connectedness of projects, many projects that I've become aware of, they don't put the pathways in yet. They leave it until a natural set of pathways evolve in the process before they design. They set up the design and then they just look at how it might roll, how it might work, rather than say, well, I think that should go there, we should put a gate there, we should put a lawn there. People kind of end up going where they want to go anyway once you've designed it. So maybe let the design play out a little bit. Okay. So can I get a sense, before we jump into this, just quickly, I guess your profession, you know, that your discipline that you're coming from, before we jump on? Yep. Engineer, technician? Yep. 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 Yep.
QA engineer.
Uh-huh.
Manufacturing, so electrician.
Yep. Yep.
Sales and marketing.
Yep.
Supervisor for coal.
Yep.
IT.
Yep.
Banking.
Yep.
Financial advice.
Yep.
Servicing.
Uh-huh.
Engineering.
Yep.
Digital marketing.
Yep.
Engineering.
Yep.
Engineering.
Marketing accounting.
Yep.
Project management.
Okay. Okay, good to know. All right. So you're all going to bring a particular set of skills, a particular set of values. But your team is the whole enchilada. So all of the aspects of your team are coming together. All of the parts together are going to come up with whatever that end meal is, the whole enchilada. God knows what's inside some enchiladas, but in the end, that's what it's called, and that's what you get. So think of all the aspects, think of the stuff we did earlier, and as you consider the guys, how they presented their idea, and when you're going to see Lachlan later, think of all how that comes together. That's my little map. For any of you that, if you want to refer to this, please listen to the Malcolm Gladwell podcast. And it fascinated me so much about the progress of that one song and how it became discovered as a concept. It was an amazing story. And if any of you listen to that and you want that to refer to it, it allowed me to understand where that song ended up from nowhere to being repurposed by Jeff Buckley and valued, to Leonard Cohen when he ended up being about 70, touring the world again and singing the original song, and the pathway, all the bits and pieces that fell in between from that. Okay. Last part I'm going to do before we get started is to tell a brief story from my business, which I think is a foundation or a premise to think about not jumping too quickly with an idea, and how you think you've got a good idea, you haven't done a good enough environmental scan. So, very short story. Our business was around compliance and was around control of risk on golf courses and race courses in Australia, Asia and the US. Before technology was as accessible as it was now, we thought we'd come up with a smart idea and build a digital unit, an electronic screen with a back end that could control the risk around the use of chemicals on golf courses and race courses. Now, they used thousands of litres of highly toxic and dangerous chemicals every year, with a significant burden of compliance, because many of those facilities have a lot of humans interacting, and they're using essentially what are broadacre chemicals, which could be quite toxic, but used in an environment where there's lots of humans moving around. Often in urban areas, so very subject to scrutiny from the EPA. And our business, my business partner, our business actually arose out of a large incident at Manly Golf Course quite a number of years ago, where 60,000 fish were killed as a result of a poor use of chemicals. So we thought, how can we control that central risk in a business by investing in technology in a product? So we commissioned a device which was built, which was hardwired back up to the superintendent or the CEO's computer, and anyone that went into the shed to use chemicals all had to be certified sprayers. They had to say how much they'd taken out, where they'd applied it, what the wind conditions were, etc. All of that, and that had to be recorded. That was a cumbersome process for them. It was all paper-based. We thought, oh, we've got a solution. We'll invest in this, and the unit will cost $5,000, but we invested a lot in to actually get, as you can imagine, get that thing built. Meanwhile, this was happening. We didn't see this coming, right? So we had the App Store. We were going, oh, Jesus. And then so we thought we better get an app up. So we got an app going. Got the app going. This is early days. There wasn't an Australian app market. It was a US-based app market. So when we got the app up and running, we had to give these guys money, tokens, to pay for it in US dollars. So they couldn't just go and get the app, because we couldn't just give it to them. We had to pay for it for them. So we had that burden. Then we had guys that said, we can't get the app. We got an Android phone. There was no Android market. It eventually came a year later. Then the iPad came along. Now here's our device over here. We hadn't sold many. The iPad came along, and it could do with an app on a device that anyone could hold, that was connected wirelessly, not hardwired. Our business idea, our concept, as good as it was, didn't survive that change, which you would have thought we would have found. But it happened so quickly, so rapidly. You remember the app market when it was just all sorts of games and stuff, not a lot of utility. Eventually, we invested in a platform and in an app, and then apps were available a dime a dozen. The thing that saved us was the capacity to go on and be able to build our own apps that weren't through the App Store, but were web-based apps. That saved us. It meant that we could move quickly away from there and automate a lot of our processes. So, value proposition, methodology. It's important that you've got a way of testing your ideas. So that's where it comes back to what you guys are about to start now. So as I said, we're going to pull out of this. The value proposition is this segment and this segment. Okay? Once you've tested the idea a little, it's important then you can bring the idea back to here. Bring it back to the full 9 segments, but do a bit of discovery through looking at the value proposition and looking at the customer segment, which is what we're going to do now. I think you've got a sense that I've already visited upon this. It's about learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure. Value proposition, customer segment, learn, build, measure. So I might hand these out now because I just get someone from each group. If you can just hand them around. You'll need the post-it notes and you'll need one package each. So you're on duty, special. So if someone could just grab one for each group. So whilst that's happening, I just want to go through a few steps. I'm presuming by now, I'm happy for you to move into your groups if you like. Now we'll start working this through. I'm presuming by now that most of you are quite familiar with the project. So let's look at the value proposition canvas. And this is what it's going to help you do. It's going to help you understand the patterns of value creation. So the patterns of value that sit around your idea. It's going to allow you to gain clarity, therefore. It's going to allow you to leverage some of your experience and skills in the team through developing a shared language. So if we put the idea onto this platform, we've got a common way of talking about the idea. And there are some concepts that will flow through from that. It'll allow you to recognise 1, clarity, 2, value. It's going to, I'm hopefully of a view that this is going to allow you to stop wasting time around ideas that don't work, because you're going to have a common language to say that I can't see the customer gain in that. I can't see the pain that that's resolving. It's going to allow you to test hypotheses quite quickly. And before we get started, we'll play a quick video. So it's very, very sharp to allow you to understand the moving fundamental aspects of this, and then we'll just go through them, the do's and don'ts, and then you get started. You can start playing with it, knowing that you've got some case studies at the back of the toolbox. Okay, I just want to quickly play this video though. Okay.
Every day, companies design products and services to improve their customers' lives.
It's not up there. Sorry. Right.
Every day, companies design products and services to improve their customers' lives. But 72% of new product and service innovations fail to deliver on expectations. This means that customers don't care about 7 out of 10 new products introduced to the market. It doesn't have to be this way. Just like you create value for your business with a business model canvas, there is in fact a tool to intentionally visualize, design, and test how you create value for customers. It's called the Value Proposition Canvas. The Value Proposition Canvas is composed of 2 parts, the customer profile and the value map. With the customer profile, you describe the jobs your customers trying to get done. Jobs can be functional, like getting from A to B, social, like impressing friends and colleagues, or emotional, like gaining peace of mind. You highlight your customers' pains, which annoy customers who are trying to get a job done. Pains and negative outcomes that customers hope to avoid, like dissatisfactions with existing solutions and challenges, frustrations, risks, or obstacles related to performing a job. And you outline customer gains, which describe how customers measure the success of a job well done. Gains are positive outcomes that customers hope to achieve, like concrete results, benefits, and even aspirations. Use the customer profile to visualize, test, and track your understanding of the people or companies you intend to create value for. It's a map that becomes clearer the more you learn about your customers. The second part of the canvas is the value map. With it, you list the products and services your value proposition builds on. You describe in which way these products, services, and features are pain relievers, how they eliminate, reduce, or minimize pains customers care about, making their life easier. And you outline in which way they are gain creators, how they produce, increase, or maximize outcomes and benefits that your customers expect, desire, or would be surprised by. The value map makes explicit how your products and services relieve pains and create gains. Use it to design, test, and iterate your value proposition until you figure out what resonates with customers. You achieve fit by creating a clear connection between what matters to customers and how your products, services, and features ease pains and create gains. Great value propositions target essential customer jobs, pains, and gains, and do so extremely well. Your customer profile may contain countless jobs, pains, and gains, but your value map highlights which ones you intend to focus on. But don't forget, an outstanding value proposition can still fail if your business model is flawed. Successful companies embed outstanding value propositions with scalable and profitable business models. Use the value proposition canvas to create products and services that customers want. Get started at strategizer.com.
So your customer profile is your right-hand side. Your value map's your left-hand side. So clarify your customer understanding. Observe your customers' characteristics that you assume. Observe and verify. So who is, in the second part of this task, who is it that you're going for? And then think about, how do you intend to create value for that customer? Remember the guy spoke about the different types of values, making someone look good, maybe not destroying their workforce, maybe giving them an edge in the industry, whatever it might be, giving all their staff a better lifestyle, whatever it might be. Think those things through. And then if you look, so off you go, have a play. Have a play. Okay. All right. We're just going to move towards the next stage of the process. We've got, when we do this normally, we actually did this exercise 2 weeks ago for a full day, believe it or not, with a multinational mining company, who I won't say who it was, who are developing a new pivot on a conventional delivery mechanism for something in mining, which I won't give it away. And we spent the whole day on this because they were so conscious of the fact that if they just did it within the conventional R&D team and marketing team and engineers, then they would have got engineering talk, marketing talk, R&D talk. Whereas when they came in and did this exercise with us, we worked through it with the whole day and it was a real working exercise. So I acknowledge that the time that we've got together tonight doesn't allow us to dive deeply into this and to execute on something from A to B, but it allows you to have, I hope, something in your toolkit that gives you an opportunity to explore these ideas a little bit differently. And as I said to most of you, as I came around your groups, some common meta language or languages that you have to talk about the idea in a way that you all understand. Okay?
Sorry, Steve, just interrupt.
Sure.
There's no one at the front door.
Oh, where is he? He knows where to come. I'll call him. Lockie, bring the beer. Okay, he'll be here in, this is quite precise, he'll be here in 8 minutes. All right, so there's 2 other cards in your kit that I've put in there. And this is, I like the way that these things force you, once you've explored an idea, there is 2. The first one says, you're getting on the front foot. This is the Strategizer test card. You're getting on the front foot with your value proposition and you're tracking it through and saying, we believe that, and I won't share any of your ideas, it's okay, with the rest of the group. We believe that our really unique idea for the second part of the task, that it'll do the following. To verify that, we will, and we'll measure that, and if we're right, it'll look like this. Then there's another card you've got in there, the blue test card, that actually looks at it in hindsight and says, well, with our really bright idea, we believed that this was going to happen. And we thought that we'd verify this. We thought that we'd measure that, but we weren't right. So the two cards that you've got give you again, so you've traced an idea through, okay? You've come up with an assumption that you believe that your magnificent idea would attract this ASX company to Newcastle in a particular way, and that's what you thought was going to happen. You play around with it a bit, and then you reflect on it afterwards. Well, actually, we thought this would happen when we tested the idea, and then actually it didn't work out the way we thought. Does that? So there's no sense. At the end, we're designing, we're iterating, we're getting it into some sort of shape, and then we're testing it. That's what the test cards are for, to test the idea at the end. So as I said, being conscious of doing this exercise a couple of times and being a mentor, when you get stuck, and you may, or you could get stuck in the next few weeks as you try to quickly get to that deadline and all get together and rush through and get the report done and then get to the point where you've got to articulate the idea. When you're a little bit stuck, can I encourage you to come back to some of these methodologies to allow you to get back on track or to get unstuck when you get stuck? Because I do recall with our group, at some points we did find ourselves segmenting the work up, getting a little bit disparate and separated as we're working in our own lives and coming back together at different times and not having a reference point to execute on the idea. So this, if I can encourage you, allows you to at least, when you do divvy up the work, the chapters, the segments, the parts of the project overall, don't get so isolated that you haven't got a place to come back to allow you to share ideas and hear that song that you're tapping out to each other. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? And the canvassing is very good. It gives you the 30,000 foot view, but the stuff's there as well to go to the detail, and you do, as you know, you do need all of you to go to the detail with regards to the report that you put in. Then you've got to communicate it. Okay. Any questions, any reflections, any thoughts? Throw anything at me that you want. I've worked over the last few years with lots of people with ideas, if you've got anything that's running around that you want to talk about or think about or ask about before Lockie gets here in approximately 3 minutes, I would imagine.
Do you think there's a general fear in the population or just in our nature to avoid disrupting industries because you've got that fear of change or, you know, breaking people's lives or people losing their jobs and how do you get past that?
I'll give you a lived example. Over the last 3 years, we've done a thing under IDA. They've got a program, iSTEM, for attracting young people into science, technology, engineering, maths. And I must say, each year that we do that, I'm blown away by, and these people are, these kids are doing Year 11 and Year 12 studies in that area. I'm blown away by what youth and what lack of experience brings to the ideas that some of these kids take to the table. They are completely unhindered by convention. They are without barrier to imagination or reimagining the ideas that they come up with. So this is the winning one this year, was a young, two young people, and this is how the idea, it's quite moving how it was driven. It was at a school in this area. One of the people at the school that was a friend of two of these young, bright people was blind and got herself around the school reasonably well and quite well on most days. The school was going under some construction, and all the, I guess, the way that she understood the lay of the land, she can get around. Well, there's a hill there, there's a stairs there, but with the building and the construction, it threw her out completely. She lost all her confidence and her independence, and she was reliant upon these two friends. So they came up with the idea, what if we could create something to help this person get around the school a little easier, with at least some of the obvious barriers and things that could stop her or hurt her getting around the school. So they invented a vest with sensors and a headphone, little speaker, so that when she come up against things that weren't normally there, she had her normal ways of getting around, at least she was alerted to the fact that there was a large obstacle around. Now, all of those technologies existed and were configured in different ways, but proximity to a customer, a user, and with a solution that came from a very real place, unhindered by we can't do this, I think is the key to innovation and to coming up with new ideas. So I think the closer you can get the idea to a user, whether it be from coming up with the idea side of it or coming up with a customer in mind, there's a really compelling idea to help this particular thing, or I've got a really unique idea, now I need to find a customer, instead of I've got a really good idea, I've got a really good idea, I've got a really good idea. I think the closer you get it, proximity to customer, the better. And iterate quickly. Get a version of it, that's what I'm encouraging you guys to. Get a version up there and knock it around. And that's, there's some great books around about that, about finding... fail fast, or finding bright spots. Find something that works in a small way, test it and iterate it and grow it. So I'm confounded by the people that walk through our door. Like, where's the guy I was talking to? Where are you? Where's he gone? Yeah. Before I came into the business, where do you go with an idea? Where do you go? In our community, in our business community, anyone from university here before I have a little bit of a dig? Universities are fantastic for research and development, but they are so far away from, their horizon for development is so long and they're so far away. In Australia, I think, in America maybe not so much because there's lots of capital investment and equity markets, but here they take so long to get to the execution of the idea. People come into our doors, we're not taking equity, and they can play around with the idea. And you know what? The reason we started our incubator model, which is a distributed model, was that there's a research group called Startup Muster, and I think there's a convention in Australia that smart ideas come from metropolitan centres. They come from Sydney, they come from Melbourne, they come from smart people in the cities. The truth of the matter is, most people that have got good ideas have got a family, they've got a mortgage, they've got a life, and they can't fold up their life and go to an incubator or an accelerator program in a capital city or in Shanghai or Tel Aviv, wherever it might be. So there's lots of good ideas, and many, many good ideas have come from people that are quite practical or that are quite ordinary. They're not the next big thing. They've just come up with an idea. They just don't have a place to take it and unpack it. Any other questions? Topics, conversation points? No? Well, now talk about ideas. Lachlan McBean is going to come up the front and tell you about his business. Lachlan has been working with us for 5 or 6 years now. Lachlan did a program we ran a while ago now called the Rippler Effect, which was a 6-month program where we immersed people with others deliberately from very different fields to challenge each other about their business idea or their concept. So in the group that Lachlan was in, we had people from all sorts of industries. And I just asked Lachlan to come in because imagine as you guys have got this project to do, and at the moment it's nothing. There's going to be a work product at the end. Imagine creating a beer, one, and then creating a company, and then creating in that space a beer that's got a unique take on how it can, how it can get to market. But I won't take away Lachlan's story. So, Lachlan, you want to come out the front?
Yeah, no worries. Would anyone like a Newcastle-owned 100% Australian beer? Yeah, right. Rather than some...
Thank you.
No worries. Rather than, the Japanese-owned, the 2 big breweries now in Australia are owned both by Japanese companies, spread them around. That's the angle I'm just coming from. So the other thing is this beer just picked up a silver medal last week at the Australian Independent Beer Awards, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Thank you, sir.
There you go.
Floor's yours, mate.
You don't like beer?
No, I don't drink at all.
No worries. There you go, mate.
Thank you.
All good?
Off you go.
How are you?
Yeah, good.
All right, here's the Thursday night anyway. Yeah. Where did I start? So about 16 years ago, I was working for my family business down in the Southern Highlands, and I went to a beer dinner. James got a beer dinner, started talking to the brewer there. I said, how'd you get in the brewing industry? I'd been homebrewing for 11 years or something. Started homebrewing at uni at 23 and because it was cheap, and the first one we drank out of the bucket. Like straight, didn't even wait to bottle it, just straight out of the bucket. As you do, but things got better. Yeah. So and then kept brewing, started just brewing with kit and sugar and water and then reading about it, and then went to this beer dinner and spoke to Rob Freshwater, who's a good mate of mine now in the industry, and I said, how'd you get into it? And he said, oh look, I went in a homebrew competition, and then they gave him a job, and part of that was to go to the University of Ballarat to study graduate certificate in brewing science. So I thought, oh, you can study it. And he said, yeah, that's great. So I went home that night, got online, got in, paid my money, started doing the course. That course now has a waiting list of about 2 years, so it's become that popular. So, and then the University of Ballarat sponsored, and they still do sponsor, the Australian International Beer Awards in Melbourne. So they used to have a trade show the day after the awards, and with that trade show there was all the different breweries at the time, and then at 1 o'clock they let the public in. So I emailed the head lecturer and I said, can I get a ticket into the trade show? Has anyone ever got a job going down and just walking around? He said, never, no one. I said, challenge accepted. So I just walked around every single brewery. Fortunately, the guys from Blue Tongue had been drinking till 6 in the morning. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so they were still half cut. But head brewer came out, had a chat with him, gave me his card, sent him a resume on Sunday. Was up here 2 weeks later on business anyway, and took me out to Paul's Asian Affair, and halfway through dinner gave me the job. So I started working at Blue Tongue in 2004. Saw that business go from 350,000 litres to 5 million litres in 5 years. And then I left. Coke, SAB Miller bought that out. I didn't particularly like working for corporates, so I left. I looked after my children full time. I had 3 boys, 7, 5 and 2. They're now 17, 15, 12. So one of them's two of them are drinking, but that's another story. Extra dry, which is even more heartbreaking. But so I spoke to Corey Crooks, who was running the Albion, and I said, look, can I come down? He was going to start Newcastle Beer Week, Craft Beer Week. So I thought, well, I heard about it. I said, I'll come down and have a chat. I've still maintained my contacts with the industry when I was away from the industry by judging. So I was judging all over the world, New Zealand, Australia, America, because I had a vision. So I started working at the pub, and I thought, because I always want to start my own brewery, the barrier to entry was cost. So equipment's actually come down in price the last 5 years, but to start up a brewery, to make sure you've got enough tanks for growth, you're probably looking between $800 and $1 million. So for someone without a job, my wife was working full time. I was looking after three kids. I basically got a job. I said to Corey Crooks, can I have a couple of shifts? Because I just want to talk to adults again. Like, I'm sick of talking to 3-year-olds. And it's the hardest. Every bloke here should go home for 6 months and do it, and then you'll have a massive appreciation of what your wife does with kids, because it is the hardest job in the world. Because I thought, oh sweet, 7 o'clock I'll start, 5 o'clock knock off. So wrong. Like midnight, still getting stuff, 3 o'clock in the morning, kids wake up, blah, blah. Anyway, now we're just waiting up till 3 o'clock in the morning for someone to ring us and go, oh, Dad, come pick me up. Anyway, so different story, right? But I was at the pub and I thought, why is no one, at the time it was 2012, 2011, why is no one, and I always wanted this with Blue Tongue. They put themselves and called them a Hunter Valley brewery, but they sold all their beer in Newcastle. They sponsored the nights. Why was no one? It was like a no-brainer for me. I was like, why is no one? We're the second biggest city in New South Wales. We love our craft beer. We've got craft beer coming in from all over the country. It's some of these breweries. It's like their second or third biggest market. Why is no one in Newcastle doing that? So I thought, well, how do I got a license? Spoke to the guys from Illawarra. They had some spare capacity, so I started going down to Wollongong to brew down there, which is pretty inconvenient. It's 3.5 hours away. So the other thing was, because it's unpasteurised, it's unfiltered, and what I know about brewing, I was worried about how I was going to travel from Wollongong up to here. I couldn't get direct, so it was going to go to Sydney, sit on a dock overnight, potentially in the sun, then get picked up. And so I got a truck. I had a truck license. I still do have a truck license. So I hired trucks. So I used to work at the pub, 5 o'clock in the morning, hire a truck the day before, 5 o'clock in the morning, drive down to Wollongong, keg it, bring it back, drop the truck back, go back to work at the pub, finish at midnight, go home, get the kids to school. I did that for about 12, 18 months, and I was absolutely knackered. So Hope Estate started 3 and a bit years ago. I knew the salesman there. I said, is there any capacity? He said, talk to the brewer, rang the brewer up. And so basically I was the first. They do quite a bit of contract brewing. I was their first contract. So that's where I'm still brewing. Next stage is to get my own equipment and my own tap room in Newcastle somewhere, and so you can all come and see the magic happen. So so I mean, trading back, I was a salesman. So I've done sales for 15 years in various capacities. So I was a sales manager of my father's business, a horticultural business, for 5 years. He was a bit disappointed when I said I'm going to become a brewer, because I'd picked up his business, by 50% in 5 years. So, but he said he gave me his blessing. So, and he's pretty proud of what I've done. So, it's it was a bit of a risk, but it's at the same time, like I thought, well, I'll buy $10,000 worth of kegs. If it all falls over, I'll sell the kegs. So that was 7 years ago. So 7 years is Christmas. So in the meantime, obviously, it's exploded, as some of you may or may not know. The competition's fierce. There's a price war on, race to the bottom on price. So I've held firm, and so what I really wanted to do from the outset, and I think where a lot of breweries make mistakes, is they want to become a national brand, and it costs a lot of money to do that, right? So you got to have reps, you got to have expensive marketing, you got to have a rep in every state, and there's $1 million right there. Plus you got to have equipment to make the beer and all the rest of it. So I've always thought, well, keep it as local as I can, because Newcastle people, A, like a beer, and 2, like a local beer. So that's been my thing from the outset. So that's been my focus, and I haven't really wavered from that. Still 90% of what I do is in the local area. Newcastle, a little bit in Lake Macquarie, a bit up at Port Stephens, and a little bit in the valley, but 90% of it is locally. So I'm in about 25 pubs and probably 10 or 15 bottle shops. So I still only have one beer in can, so I'm getting constantly barraged by what's your next beer, what's your next beer. So that there's pressure there, but because there's breweries putting out a new beer literally every 2 weeks, which is, I don't know how you do that, but I know how you do it, but I don't know how you market it, come up with labels, do all that. So I'm still a one-man business. I do sleep sometimes, occasionally I get a surf in, and occasionally I have a beer. So, but yeah, it's and in the last 4 months I'm consulting out at a brewery in Dubbo. So I've been doing that for the last 4 months. I'm going out there tomorrow. So yeah, I've commissioned that brewery, put the recipes together, and I've brewed the beers out there as well. So that sort of fell in my lap. They rang me up out of the blue, and I said, "You do know I've got my own business in Newcastle?" And they said, "Yeah, that's fine. Just come out." So they have said to me, I apologise to anyone that's from Dubbo, but they have said to me, "You sure you don't want to move to Dubbo?" And I just look at them and I say, "There's no surf in Dubbo." What I really want to say is, "Fuck that." You couldn't pay me to live in Dubbo. It's actually not a bad town, having been there now, but it's it's the Central West. It's 5 hours away. There's no water. It's dry as a chip. There's no surf.
So guys, you got someone who now you essentially got to find a customer. In this exercise, you have to attract someone from nothing. You got someone here who's in front of you who's started a business from nothing to a product that's in front of you. You are coming up with a product. Lockie, you can see how he's defined his customer segment and his value proposition. Can you see the undulations might have happened around him, but he's stayed very clearly articulated to a particular customer segment and a particular value proposition. Now, obviously there's price issues. You're going to have, you're in a competition here, and the customers the customer or the end user, the ASX company that you attract, will have a price point. So you need to define and hold to the definition of your value.
Yeah, so I had a bit of an advantage is that from some of my relationships at Blue Tongue, I was a brewer at Blue Tongue, but it was also I'm a pretty personal sort of bloke, so I knew a lot of the venues that we dealt with. So my first 3 customers, so I did 22 kegs when it was my first batch. My first 3 customers, well, A was the Albion because I was working there, so it was a bit of an open goal there, but and then Silo, who I knew Mark because we dealt with Blue Tongue, and then the Burwood, who Ty Burford, the Burfords were one of the founding families of Blue Tongue. So I thought if I spread it out too wide and I run out of beer, then I'll be in trouble. So I did 23 kegs. The Albion did a keg a day for 9 days. So at the time, it was the quickest keg. I think it did a 50-litre keg in an hour and a half on the opening night. So, which I was pretty proud of. Then I actually did run out of beer. So I should have done a double batch from the outset, but you don't know. And then it's just been my marketing's just been knocking on doors, just going into pubs and going, "How you going? You're interested in a local beer?" And I suppose the other thing is that I know I'm a qualified brewer, so I know how to make quality beer. And there's a lot of breweries starting with homebrew background, and they don't know what they don't know. So when things are bad, it can take months for that flow-on effect to go, "Oh yeah, I've had that beer before. It's not great." And then slowly, their sales started to dwindle, and they don't know why. So, I suppose these guys in Dubbo have gone the other way. They go, well, you know what you're doing. We don't have a brewer. It's going to be hard for us to get someone out here to brew that's got commercial experience. You set it up. I'm training a local guy up who's never brewed before, who's a chef. And so, but he's cluey. Like, he's a 43-year-old. He's been head chef at pubs. He's got his own catering company, and he's ringing me, asking me questions, and I'm going, it took me like 5 years to learn that shit. Yeah, yep, that's right. Yep, do that. Yep, do that, and do that. Great. Any problem? Give me a ring. Bang. So he's all over it. Like, he's just kegged. He kegged 2 batches of beer a day by himself. So that's 7 weeks in. So maybe I've taught him well. Maybe he's picked it up well. Combination of both. But yeah, look, the quality aspect. You know, like 7 years ago, my quality actually stood out. These days, if you don't have a quality product, you don't even get a look in the door. Like, there's that much. Like, I've got venues telling me that we get 20 reps on a Thursday and a Friday, and they've never heard of them. They've never heard of these companies. They just walk and go, "Yeah, how you going, mate? I'm from Sydney. I've got a brewing company, bro." And yeah, and I was like, mate, get in the line. There's 20 people behind you, you know, in front of you. You know, you're at the back of the line. So it's there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on that. But again, yeah, I mean, I've branded myself to Newcastle from the outset. You can always go to the pub for a sneaky one. So it's, you know, I'm not resting my laurels by any means, but it's, you know, the marketing, that's my next thing too. Yeah, I've got to get some marketing sorted out, because that's key. Because I look at it now and I go, well, marketing's probably 70% of what you do, because perception of what you do is a massive thing, and how you're perceived, and then actually telling the story. I feel that I probably haven't been great at that through different channels, but I've identified that I've got to work on that and get someone in to help me out with that. So that's next stage as well. But yeah.
Any questions from the group about a journey of creating a product and a value proposition or a customer segment? No?
Yeah, are you trying to grow it, or are you happy for it to be a particular size?
No, I want to grow it. Like, I'll have to get staff. I've been told to avoid them as long as I can, but I mean, look, I've only been, you know, paying myself I've put a lot of money into it, and I've only been really paying myself the last 3 years, and I probably got paying myself a little bit less than got paid when I was about 20, but you know, I do want to grow it, but where I see the growth, and from what I've seen all over the world, the model is you have to have your own taps, so you're making beer at cost and selling it at retail over your own bar, and that's a touch point as well for people to come to and see that. And I think once I'd rather invest in that and then continue to grow outside of that as well. Because that opens up massive possibilities and massive loyalty as well with venues. Because I can on a Monday or a Tuesday when we're closed, I can get venue staff, get them in, show them the whole process, give them lunch, and you know, you got 15 people there. You've given them a great time. They know your story. They know the process. And those 15, what I'm noticing now, like a lot of the guys I work with at the Albion are now managers at venues, so they know me. And so that process happens all the time. So if you get, you know, younger staff at venues, and and then people walk up to me all the time and go, "Oh, I remember you from," I'm like, "Yeah, hi, yeah, I've forgotten your name, but yeah, good, yeah, that's great." But that flow on effect happens. But the other thing, I could have grown quicker if I'd gone out to investment. But every spot I spoke to, they just thought, well, we'll put money in and we'll pull money out quickly. And I'm like, well, it's not like that. If you want to do that, go to the stock exchange, buy a house. I don't know. It's a long burn, right? It's a slow burn. Look, Endgame is probably, everyone's like, oh, you're going to sell it. You know, one of the big boys will buy this. When I started, there was 100. When Blue Tongue started, there was 20 breweries in the country. When I started, there was 180. Now there's 640. So everyone's thinking, oh, the payday's coming. But all the big guys have bought, and their pockets are probably run, the money's run out. They've bought the breweries they want to. Every brewery they bought had national distribution, and a home base. So already, so they just tap into that and then put it Coca-Cola, Asahi, you know, CUB, Lion, Nathan, they just put that into their distribution channels and off it goes. So it's actually getting harder to get a tap. Tap space is even harder than it was because now they say, I've got 75% of Lion taps and the last 3 taps are now, you know, Byron Bay Brewery, which is a Lion-owned brewery, Little Creatures, or James Squire. So there we go, bang, mainstream beers, craft beers. We don't need anyone, sweet as. Same with Carlton. Carlton now got Carlton Asahi, you've got Mountain Goat, Pirate Life, Green Beacon that they've just bought out of Brisbane, and Four Pines out of Sydney. So pretty strategic. Brisbane, Sydney, Adelaide, Melbourne. So they've bought breweries on that corner.
Okay. We might wrap up there. If those that are fascinated with the beer industry, Lockie may still be here for a while. But I want to thank Lockie for coming in again and giving a sense from a practical point of view about getting a product to market. Thanks, Lockie.
Thank you.